Alrighty, guys, let's get started for today. So, the little, I guess, activity of the day is just kind of asking, when are this week's assignments due? I know it's a little bit cheesy to think about, but just want to make sure everyone knows that everything is due for Sunday night, right? So that's everything from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and today, right? Everything that has the deadlines on it. So all of those assignments that are on each day's assignments, right? And we can view them right on our little calendar here. So everything here in red, that's the only stuff that absolutely has to get done before Sunday. A reminder that the extra credit quizzes, these are really, really good prep for your exam, which is going to be on Monday. And the way that it's going to end up working, I'll be posting an announcement on Brightspace about this, is for each of the quizzes that you do, you'll get 1.5 points towards your midterm. So you'll get 1.5 points for each of these guys. That'll go for midterm one, then 1.5 points for each of these guys on midterm two, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? So, um, it helps to take these quizzes, right? These are going to be very, very similar questions to what you'll probably get on the midterm. It's going to be definitely a lot of multiple choice. There's probably going to be a lot of questions. But it's meant that, we've gone over a lot of stuff. Maybe you forgot how to create a chart or something, or maybe you forgot where a certain setting was in Excel. If you forget something, it's not a big deal because there's going to be more points to bring you up. You'll be able to answer whatever questions that you can answer, right? You have your notes with you the whole time, right? And anything that maybe you ends up getting wrong could get boosted by the quizzes, right? So it's definitely going to be very manageable, right? And depending on how students do, in case there ends up being a question, maybe that ends up being not very well answered, maybe we'll see about like doing a curve if necessary, but definitely you guys will be able to do really well with it. So don't worry, just keep going over the questions, keep going over the PowerPoints. Nothing that was not gone over in the PowerPoints will be on the exam. So I'm not going to say, tell me about this super obscure formula that you've only covered in a very small part of a project. Like none of that, right? We're going to be curating the questions so that it's stuff that we've gone over in lecture quite a lot, that you've done multiple times in like the lab assignments, right? If it's something really, really obscure and really unfair, then we're not going to be including that there.
Excuse me, Professor.
Yeah, what's up?
What about that PMT formula? That one kind of be messing me up a bit.
Don't even worry about that. That's exactly what I meant by like some obscure formula, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so don't worry about things like that. It's going to be very simple. Like maybe like as a sample question, maybe it'll be like sum up these two columns or something. Like find the average. Like nothing overly crazy. Like you don't have to like worry about like memorizing like crazy formulas. Okay, and a question in the chat just to clarify, the homework assignments are graded on completion, correct? Um, so try to get maximum points on them. That's what I would really recommend. But if let's say like there's a part of the uh like lab that isn't working correctly, like I'm not gonna be taking points off for that. That is to say, like if you do it and it's completely wrong, then yeah, there's going to be like some points taken off. But if you have it mostly correct, then you're going to get full credit for it. So no need to worry about that. And I'll be also increasing the amount of attempts as well. I realize that Pearson has it on default that you only get like one attempt. So if something glitches out, like then you kind of lose all of your attempts and everything, which isn't fair. So, yeah, I hope that answers the question. Any other questions about assignments that are due, the midterm, etc.?
But a midterm, we don't have to come to class, right? You said it's gonna be hybrid.
Correct. Yeah, it's either going to be on Pearson or on Brightspace, but it is going to be offered hybrid.
That's good. Thank you.
Yeah, the final exam though, that is going to be in person only. So midterm one, midterm two, hybrid, final exam will be in person. And the labs before the exam, right, will be spent kind of going over, reviewing whatever you guys need. So the Monday lab will start going over stuff from chapter 4, right? The like the labs and everything for that. But if you guys have specific questions that you want to go over, you can definitely go over it. And during like the first maybe 20 minutes of lecture, if you have questions too, we can definitely go over some stuff before we actually start the exam. Otherwise, you'll just do the exam during lecture, and once you finish the exam, then you can leave early. So it'll be a nice chill day after the exam on Monday. And no new assignments or anything either, right? So you won't have to worry about anything being due. Um, so yeah, just make sure you get through everything here in red before Sunday night, and you will be all set. Alrighty. So with that being said, any other questions? All right, let's review for the warm-up really quick. So let's say we had a data set showing the annual salaries of 10 employees at a small company. 9 employees earn between $40,000 and $60,000, but the company CEO earns $500,000, right? So that CEO is really racking in that money while the other employees are making nothing compared to that. So if we want to compare the typical salary of a regular employee at this company, right? We have to use a certain type of statistic here. And we don't want it to be affected by this huge outlier. So if I take the mean, right? Mean is just the average. Well, if I take the average of something, let's say you do super well on one exam, but you do really, really bad on another exam, right? Um, that's going to end up being like an outlier, right? And it'll either shoot your grade up or bring your grade down. So likewise, if I have this really large amount of money here, taking the mean of it is going to shoot it upwards. That's going to be quite skewed. If I take the range instead, the maximum minus the minimum, right? Again, if I take 500,000 as the largest, and let's say $40,000 as the smallest, right? That's going to get me 480,000. That's going to be really skewed as well because that's not the average whatsoever. That's skewed extremely by this 500,000. So we don't want to use range either. Mode is the most frequent value. And if we had two CEOs, but like everyone else made a different amount of money, like let's say someone did 40,000, 41,000, 42,000, etc., then the CEO is the most frequent value, 500,000. That wouldn't be very accurate either because there's still 9 employees that earn between this amount. This is why we have to use the median value. We're essentially, when we take the median, ordering everything from least to greatest, and we're finding what that middle value is. So even if there's an outlier or two, we're still shifting all the way into the middle part, which should be neatly between this 40,000 and 60,000, right? We don't have to worry about taking an average and it being extremely skewed. So when you're taking different statistical data, something just to be aware of, if you have outliers that might skew your data, right? You want to make sure that your data is telling the story that you want it to be saying. So we want to be taking the median for that. Alrighty, let us get started with our slides for today. Okay, so we're going to be continuing a little bit with charts today. And we're just going to be going over a couple of really cool features. Oh, sorry, yeah. Absolutely, yeah. Okay, so mode is the most frequent value, right? So if, let's say, I had 9 employees that earned between 40,000 and 60,000. Let's say I had an employee that was 40,000, 41,000, 42,000, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? But the company CEO earns $500,000. Maybe there were 2 CEOs, right? And each of them earned $500,000. But there were 9 employees that all earned different amounts between this. The mode is saying the most frequent value. So if 2 CEOs earned this amount, but the 9 other employees earned this amount, in reality, the average should be within this 40,000 to 60,000 range. But if we take the most frequent value, it ends up being 500,000 because there were 2 of these guys. So it's based on the same frequent value, not necessarily based on a range, right? I mean, not this range, but if it's talking about the median, on the other hand, we're essentially ordering all the data and we're actually finding what's in the middle. So if I had like 40,000, 45,000, 50,000, et cetera, and then 500,000 as an outlier, I shift all the way to the middle and it should be something in between these guys, right? The most frequent value will not necessarily tell me how all of this is related to each other. Does that kind of make more sense? Yeah, of course. Okay, so today we're going to kind of continue with putting data sets into charts, but today we're going to focus a little bit more on if we have larger data sets and kind of like how we can sort these guys and use things like conditional formatting to visually see kind of what's going on here. So let's say we have this really large data set, right? I mean, this thing is like by like 1,000 by 1,000 at this point, right? It's big. There's a lot of stuff going on here. Maybe this is like a roster of students, right? Very hard to see, and you don't know who's really in this data set, right? Now, we could do a couple of different things here. Let's say that I had, for instance, some section headers here, right? And if I have some section headers here, this is going to be scrolled away if I scroll down, right? For instance, I see over here in my calendar, I'm scrolling down and I lose this top part completely, right? This is not good. This is going to end up making me confused at this point because I might be like, oh, I forgot, was this the lab assignments or was this the graded assignments, etc., right? I want to be able to freeze this row over here. And if I'm able to freeze this row, right, then I could essentially get the following effect. When I scroll down, it stays perfectly, and I can clearly see what column that I'm in. Now, I can do the same exact thing with my columns too if I wanted to. I could even freeze here as well and freeze up to a certain column. Now, I'm on Google Sheets doing this right now because this is the resource spreadsheet, but the same thing works with our Excel, right? Let's say that I had this table over here, okay? What I'm going to do is, let's say I want this part to be frozen, right? I don't want to be scrolling and this header going away, right? So let me get this formatted, right? I'm going to go to my view tab over here, right? And I see over here, I see this freeze panes part. There's a couple of different things going on here. I could freeze the top row, I could freeze the first column, or if there's multiple panels that I want to freeze at once, I could do it up here. So let's say I want to just freeze the top row for the time being. The only thing that was frozen was that top row. That's my section header. So if this data went on and on and on forever, right, the header is still going to be there and it's still going to be nicely organized. Now I can do the same for columns as well. Let's say if I had some data over here instead, right? I could freeze the first column. Now this over here is going to be frozen on this side, right? If there was some data over there that I wanted to keep in mind. If I want to freeze multiple columns, I can select the columns that I want to freeze, and I can just click on freeze those panels. Now, oops, sorry, I have to click over here, right? What I'm going to do is if I go to the column next to it, right, what it will do is it will freeze up to column C. So now A and B are going to be frozen. So I can do the same with rows as well. Let's say I wanted to freeze this whole chart over here, right? I'm going to go over here and I'm going to freeze up to here. Oops, actually, sorry. If I wanted to do the whole chart, I'd have to go one row, one column over, and I'm going to freeze up to there. So you could see that there's a line, right? These two little gray lines that are dividing this. And even if I'm scrolling along, these entries are never going to change, right? So whether I freeze a single row, a single column, or if I freeze an entire range like this, whenever I scroll, this will always be on my screen. So I go to view, I go to freeze panes. I could either automatically do the first row or the first column, or go one box over from wherever I want it to be. So if I wanted to freeze up to A, B, C, I have to go into the D column here. Or if I want to freeze up to row 7, I go into row 8 over there. I do that, and then I can just click on the first option that would let me do that. So this is really important when we're dealing with giant data sets like this, right? We don't want to be dealing with scrolling through a ton of data and not knowing what we're dealing with here. Right? This is something that I use in my own spreadsheets as well. For instance, if I'm doing student grades, I want to make sure that I keep the header that has student name, student ID, etc. on there so I know exactly what type of data that I am dealing with as I go along. Okay, I could actually show that over here. This is a spreadsheet that I had used to grade my students' quizzes from my last semester. So you guys are lucky you guys don't have graded quizzes, so you don't have to worry about that. Just for anonymous purposes, I did hide the names themselves. As we could see, there's A and B columns that are missing, right? But if I scroll down, I can see quiz 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. all along here, no matter what. And if I unhid the names, I also had it so that the names would be also frozen as well. So if I'm looking over here, I could see that this value corresponds to a certain student for quiz 9. We'll also go through this example as well when we go over conditional formatting, which was the way that I got all of these boxes to display in different colors. This made it way easier for me to drop students' grades because what I did was I had a deal where I would drop their two lowest quiz grades or their three lowest quiz grades if they filled out the course evaluation for that class. So using conditional formatting made that way easier for me, which we'll be going through later. But using those freezing panes as well was major asset, right? Otherwise, I would be like, whoa, what quiz is this? I don't know. Or what student would that have referred to? Okay. So aside from freezing panes, right, there's a couple of other things too that you can do to change up your layout on a really big data set. If instead of going to view, I go to page layout, there's a lot of different things that I can kind of change up here. Now, this is a little bit more relevant if I'm going to be printing actual pages out rather than just using it on my computer where I can change the view freely. Right? Let's say I'm printing on a specific paper. I might want to change the margins. I might want to change the orientation. Right? Maybe I'm dealing with a tall and skinny spreadsheet. Maybe I'm dealing with a wider spreadsheet. I could change between portrait and landscape. Could change the size of the spreadsheet. I could even change the part that is actually printed entirely. Because otherwise, maybe I don't want the entire spreadsheet printed. Maybe I only want a small part printed and the rest is just like general data. Maybe I just want the part that I actually did formulas on to get like the average test score or something like that. I can make page breaks too, because when you're dealing with a really, really big spreadsheet like this, let's say, right? This goes on and on and on and on and on. If I'm actually printing this out, I need to make sure that it actually fits on paper. So if I want to make sure it fits on paper, if there's like 100 rows, that's definitely not going to fit. I have to make sure that I break it down into specific pieces. I could do other features too. Could add backgrounds, could add titles to things. I could even add in specific rows and specific columns that I want repeated as well. So if I were to set the specific print area, right, what I can do is I click on page layout and print area, and I select exactly what gets printed. So you can see that out of this spreadsheet, this is the only thing that's getting printed. And there's a little gray background here that says this is going to be my page 1. All right, so if I have multiple pages, maybe I want this square to be page 1 and the next 10 students to be on page 2. I could set this on each page layout so that I get X amount of students on each page. So on this page setup as well, there's a variety of different functions. So if let's say I wanted to go over here to my page layout, right? My page setup, there's a lot of things here that we can look at, right? This kind of page setup over here has all of these features, but more detailed. Could change it between portrait and landscape. I could adjust the scaling to make sure it fits. I could change the margin. So if I want more or less room, this is more useful if I'm printing, but maybe I want things to be a little bit more spread out because right now these might be going all the way to the edge and we might not want that. I could add headers and footers here as well. This is a nice, easy way of adding those headers and footers. If I was printing this out, maybe I want something that labels, hey, this is X spreadsheet. This is Y spreadsheet. Footer, maybe I'm saying this is the end of the sheet. Things like that. I could even change it to make sure that on each page, right, on an odd page, it says one thing. On an even page, it says something else. Maybe I'm printing something out in a book format, right? We know with a book, it's mirrored on each side. If I want to have a page format in like the top corners, right? If it's on the left side, I want it on the top left. If it's on the right side, I want it on the top right. So we could even do something like that, have a different first page if we want. Maybe there's a title page, all kinds of things like that. We can change the print area by going to the sheet here. And now this is a small spreadsheet, right? It's just literally this part here. But if I had a lot of stuff going on here, I can specify that, Yeah, I only want like over here printed out, right? Now this is going to print out everything because this is all that I got, right? But let's say I just have this part over here, right? Notice that again, we have absolute references, those dollar signs wrapping around that are telling us that this is the set component. I am not changing this if I end up moving this to a different part of my spreadsheet. This is my hard-coded part. I can repeat certain rows at the top. Maybe I have title rows, maybe I have header rows, right? If I had a spreadsheet that looked like this, let's say, we know the students go on and on and on and on and on forever. The row 5 here has all the headers, but if I printed this out, that frozen pane would not take effect. I would have to repeat this to be the header on every single page if I'm printing this out. So that's why we have this rows and columns to repeat. This will allow me to, let's say if I wanted to, repeat this row over here. So if this ended up going on multiple pages, I would have this header appear on every single page. This is really more relevant if you're printing things out, but it's good to know that you can format these things this way because if you have a lot of data, you want to make sure that people know that what's going on with the headers and everything like that. Okay. So we've gone over using the Excel sheets themselves, but what if we want something that's a little bit smaller, right? For instance, over here, right? This is just a small piece of data, right? What I did was I turned this into a table. That's why it's formatted in this like blue and white alternating pattern. There's these little arrows here that let me filter. It keeps my data a little bit more organized, right? So let's walk through if I were to deal with something like this, right? Let's say that I had some names and I had some numbers, right? And let's just say I have A, I have B, I have C, I have D, I have E, blah, blah, blah. And for numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. So I want to make this into a table instead. Tables are really great because they have built-in filtering options and they have uh, a lot of really cool features that make it a little bit more organized for specific pieces of data rather than just dealing with an ordinary spreadsheet, right? If I select this, I can insert and I can put a table in here, right? We see over here, right? Not the charts here, but this time a table. It'll use my absolute references, once again, to wrap around and show that these are the values that I want to use. I could specify if my table has headers to make the first row the header. So I'm going to specify that it has headers, and just like that, I get a nicely organized table. I could change the cell styles. There's a lot of really cute built-in ones here, right? Maybe I want to make it pink, blue, green, black, all kinds of things like that. Let's make it orange. We'll separate it from here, make it New York Knicks style, right? So what I can now use these filtering options here. Before I changed this to a table, I did not have those options. Yeah, we know I can use find and select and sort and filter, but it's not based on these columns like it is over here. I can immediately sort this between ascending or descending, right? Descending would be backwards, ascending is alphabetical like that. Now, I did this in alphabetical order to begin with, so it really didn't make much of a difference. I could even sort it by color, right? Right now, it's in one of these cell styles, right? So we see that there are different colors kind of going on here, but maybe I had it sorted by its own color, right? Maybe I wanted all of the red boxes in one way or all the blue boxes in one way, etc. I could do things like that, right? I could even change the value that I'm sorting by. Maybe I'm sorting by students like first name, right? And I want to choose all the names that have A, all the names that have B. I can filter on and off all of these little values. Select all, select none, etc. And as you can see, auto apply is saying, as I'm clicking this, things are changing. Now, as I click these things too, I could filter a little bit more specifically. I can say if this filter equals A. I could say does not equal. I could say begins with, does not begin with, ends with, does not ends with, contains, does not contain, right? So if I'm filtering by people's first or last names, I could say all names that begin with A, all last names that begin with A. Or maybe something that has an A. Maybe I'm looking at your grade point average and I'm looking for all the students that have a 3.0 or higher. If you have a 3.0 or higher, you'll automatically get honors, let's say. I could do all kinds of things filtering in this way. This is not built in on a standard sheet. I must do this with a table, which is why it's so powerful to put all of your data like this into these nice organized tables, right? You might have thought before, oh, isn't Excel just literally a table? No, tables are their own built-in data set, right? They're a data structure. It's more specific than just dealing with the sheet itself. So we went over the fact that we can filter, right? But it also has a lot of other advantages too. Instead of having to manually freeze things, those column headings are going to remain on screen. I can easily format my rows and columns, right? We went through the whole idea of using those cell styles to make them into different colors. I could edit formulas as well. We're going to go through how to make a formula work for a table, which is different than the formulas we're used to with sheets. These are going to end up using what's called a structured reference. It's going to be a little different than the references we used before, right? We went over absolute and relative references. Absolute having our dollar sign and it's fixed. Relative does not have the dollar sign and it can change if I drag and drop. These guys are going to work a little bit differently in the form of structured references. It's going to be structured based on the structure of our table. So whatever our rows or our columns are is what we're going to base our formulas on, which we'll see in a minute. Okay, so we went over how to create the table. Another really cool feature is we can remove duplicates. So if I wanted to, let's say I had over here, I'm gonna just bring back the original table, right? Let's say this was also an A. All right, so I have two A's here at this point. Well, I don't want that here, right? I clearly want to get rid of the duplicates. Maybe I accidentally had a student fill out the attendance form twice, right? And I want to get rid of that. All right, so what can I do? Just like with the charts, right? If I hover and click on one of these tables, right? A little table green green word over here pops up. Just like how with chart it said chart design, chart format, etc. These green components on our ribbon are only available when you are actually clicking upon one of those components. Now, this has all of our little table icons here and a very nice little remove duplicates here. I can change it from filtering only on the names, only on the numbers, or just literally everything. So I only have duplicates on these two A's here, right? So when I click on this, oh, no duplicate values found. Okay, let me specify it a little bit more then, right? I'm just going to say just the names, right? Because there's A and A there. Now it's going to pop up and say that there has been a duplicate value found. The reason it didn't work before is because I had name and number. It was looking for a duplicate name and number together, right? This was A1, not A2. If it was A2, right, then that would have deleted. So we have to be careful of what specifically are we dealing with here, right? When I remove the duplicates here, right, the only duplicate part is the name component. Now, if I ended up making this A2 and A2, now both of these guys are duplicates. So I can choose to now select all and remove duplicates based on name and number. Removes our duplicate. Or if I wanted to base it just on the number, right? It'll also delete because we have two duplicate numbers, right? If let's say I made this a 2 instead, these guys are not duplicates, but these two are duplicates. I'm going to remove duplicates there. If I clicked on this default select all, it's going to give me another error because there are no duplicate name number combinations. But if I only select the numbers, it's going to pick up on that duplicate too. So that's going to be the difference between removing the duplicates based on our respective columns in that case. But this is a really handy feature because if you have a lot of duplicate values, maybe there's a lot of students that filled in and you only want to have one instance of their names and number, then you want to be able to use that. Okay. Any questions before we go on? Okay, we're just going to do a little bit more. We'll take a nice little break and then finish off with the last topic. So as I went over before, tables allow you to format things really nicely, right? You have this nice little alternating rows and columns kind of style going on here, right? This is really nice and handy. You can automatically format this just like how you would automatically formatting a sheet as well. Keeps things a little bit more organized. You can even make your own new table style, right? Maybe I want to make things a little bit more colorful. I want things to be a certain color style. Maybe it's my company's colors. Maybe I want to do it as red, white, and black and do Queen's College colors, right? I could do something like that, and I can make a new table style and have it as that color scheme too. That's something I can totally do. So a couple of the other options here as well. You can also change the header rows. You can change the first column and the last column here. You can also use the total row, which is a nice handy option that lets you automatically calculate the total of something, right? So before, if we wanted to calculate a total, we have to just use the sum function. Here, I can actually put a total row here if I wanted to, right? So let me actually, I'll use this one here because this is actual numbers, so I could actually kind of add this stuff up. So if I click over here, I'm in my little table icon, table ribbon part over here. I'm going to click on a total row. Just like that, I got a total row. No function required. That's why tables are awesome. It does this automatically for me. Now, this is using this column here to calculate a total, right? Maybe that's not exactly what we want in this case, right? But by default, this total row is going to go in the bottom right-hand row. Again, I can now move this formula that was pre-generated to, let's say, here instead if I wanted to, right? I don't have to necessarily have it there by default. If I move it over here, let's say, right? I just have to change the references. This is going to be a little bit different than what we're used to, because this is that structured reference that I was talking about. So the first parameter here is what's called a function number. This is a encoded number that refers to what type of function I am looking for, right? We're used to putting our function over here, but with the subtotal function, it's different than using a sum, an average, any other normal function. It's based on a table. And because of that, I have to encode a specific function that's made for a table. So if I were to rewrite this from scratch, because Excel is awesome, it fills in the blank for me, right? I don't have to memorize these function numbers because who in their right mind is going to know, oh, 109, that's just, adding things up and making a total, clearly. If I go here, I can see all of my functions correspond to a specific integer number. If I want to take the average, I put a 1 here. If I want to count, I put a 2 here, and on and on and on, right? The one that it was using before is the sum function, which relates to 109. I am not entirely sure what the numbers themselves correspond to be honest. It's kind of strange how we go from 1 through 11 and then 101 to 111, but Excel is able to essentially decode that these numbers correspond to the following functions encoded specifically for a table, because this is stored a little bit differently in Excel than it would be on a normal sheet. So let's switch it around a little bit. Let's do an average instead. So my first parameter is just going to be 1. Cool. Then I'm going to reference the column I want to take an average of. I could reference a column, I could reference a row, I could reference literally whatever I want here. But if I'm referencing something, it's going to be formatted differently than our just normal. Let's say I wanted to say B2 through B7, right? If I said B2 through B7, this would give me an error because B2 through B7 is for a sheet, not a table. This is encoded differently. So what I'm going to have to do here instead is I'm going to have to use the structured reference. So the structured reference, it's a little hard to see that. I want to show what it looks like before we kind of go on because it's a little confusing at first, right? What we do is we surround the column or row that we're dealing with these brackets. And there's a little at sign here. So at is referring to a specific row or column, right? So unlike when we're dealing with sheets and we're just referring to rows and columns as their number or letter, like B7, A2, etc., here I'm actually referring to the name of the column or the row itself. In this case, the name of our column is just names and nums, right? So I can click on this if I want, and it'll automatically encode it for me in that format, right? Or I could write it essentially in the way that we did on on here as well. So it's giving me a little divide by zero error here. It should not because this should add up. So let's try to encode it the other way instead, if that's the case, right? Because we want to essentially do it as a structured reference. So what I'm going to do, right, is I'm going to wrap this guy around in brackets and put a little at sign there, right? So if I put this here, at bracket, the name of the column, right? This is going to refer to this, let's say, names column. Okay. So, oh, actually, the reason that it was giving me an error was because I accidentally referred to this guy over here, right? I can't find the average of letters like that, right? If I changed it to this one over here, right, instead, okay, forget it. Never mind. Let me just encode it normally the way it would be. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use bracket. I'm going to say at, and I'm going to say, let's say, just numbers, right? And I'm going to end bracket that. Okay, so at this point, right, what am I doing wrong here? unless I have to do it with brackets here too. Okay, I'm going to change this instead of using the average function. I'm going to just say, let's count it instead. Okay, not too sure what is causing the issue here. It was working earlier when I was doing this function over here. So if anything, I'm thinking it might just be the formatting here. So let me instead just do it in this column instead. So if let's say I wanted to take this column multiplied by this column, right? I'm just going to change this to, instead of being names and numbers, I was just practicing using names and numbers, which originally was these same values here. I'm just going to say that this is going to be column 1's numbers, and over here is just going to be column 2 numbers. All right. So over here, let's say I just want to multiply these guys together, right? I can just multiply them like a normal function here. But instead of referring to them as, let's say, cell A2 and cell B2, I refer to them as at column 1 times at column 2. So what this is telling me is take the value at this row in column 1 and multiply it with that same value in column 2. So this becomes 2 times 1, which is 2. I can drag and drop this formula as follows. And because this is not necessarily given an absolute reference, I don't have to worry about having it hard-coded as only these two values, right? Excel is automatically detecting it as whatever is in the current row that I'm in. So it's saying, use whatever is in my row from column 1. Use whatever is in row 3 in column 2. So as I go along, right, if I viewed my formula for all of these guys, it's going downwards, right? It's referring to each of these guys in that corresponding row. So I can hard code any of these specific functions that I want. For instance, in here, this Trinkets, Toys, and Games was taking a purchase price, multiplying by the quantity, and then subtracting by some rebate value, right? So this is great for when I have things that are automatically in a table format, right? I have to refer to them. I'm in that same row. So Excel automatically knows exactly which values that I'm referring to because I'm saying use the values in my row that are in this column, and this column. And I could change it. I could flip-flop it too. I could say instead of using the columns as the quantifiers here, as the structured references, I could switch it around. If it was the other way around and the rows had those values instead, right? Then it tells me, okay, well, refer to whatever you're in, whatever column you're in, hard code that, and refer to your row values instead, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to refer to a column. It could be a row too. It just matches this reference with whatever reference is down here. Could be in a row, could be in a column, whatever it is. Okay. So key here is tables don't use normal references. They use structured references. There'll be plenty of time to practice with this because it's a little confusing, right? We just learned about using cell references like A2, B3, etc., making it absolute by using the dollar signs to wrap it around. Now with tables, it's something a little bit even different that we're using these brackets and this at sign, right? Because these headers are hard-coded onto the table. Okay, so this was the subtotal function that I was talking about, right? So the previous ones that we had gone over did not use a subtotal function, right? This is just a hard-coded function that we created, just like saying cell A1 times cell A2. Well, I'm just saying the cell in purchase price times the cell in quantity. So purchase price is $4.99 times quantity, and we subtract the rebate. Okay. The cell is here, right? It's referring to these three values right here. If I drag and drop this to all of these guys, right? The second row over here is referring to these three values. The third row, these three values. Just like with a reference that is relative, how we drag and drop, it still stays the same. Now, if I'm using my subtotal function instead, right, this is where we have to hard code that function number itself, right? This was the one that was not really working very well on our end, but let's go through the PowerPoint and see if there's something that ended up causing an issue with it. So if I bring back a total row, I'm just gonna do it over here. Okay. Notice how this is aggregating from these numbers here, right? I'm saying use the 109 function. This is a sum function, right? And we're aggregating from the nums column, right? So it's automatically performing the sum function from this. And these are pretty much the main functions that you're able to use for this. We kind of saw as well, Excel kind of auto fills in and matches it up. So you don't have to worry about memorizing these, right? You don't have to know average is 1, count is 2, count A is 3. Like it tells you directly when you're filling in a subtotal function, right? If I did subtotal over here, oops. I put the parentheses and all of these guys pop up right there. Okay, so it gives you the list of formulas. All right. And we went over how to sort. Let's take a small break. Let's come back at about 12:12, since we've been kind of going on for about an hour here, and we could use a break. So we'll come back at 12:12. So take a minute. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. And yeah, get some fresh air. Take a deep breath.
Oh, Professor, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. Thanks for catching that. All right. Yeah, sorry about that. Was just saying, if you need to filter something, and let's say it's not already in a table format, right? I can click over here, sort and filter, and this lets me filter that way instead. So tables have built-in format, not a table, use the sort that's over here instead. Okay. So you could filter by anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be numbers and letters. Even by date works as well. So if let's say you had a bunch of student responses and you wanted to filter by the time that they actually submitted them, I could use that by using a date filter or a time filter, right? So this is very handy when you have these large data sets and you got to organize it somehow. So a lot of different ways that you can do that. You're not just limited to just alphabetical. And you can even auto filter if, let's say, I wanted just something on a certain day. Show rows where date is equal to, I could put today's date. I could put anything from there. So it makes things a lot easier. So if I have like an attendance form and I'm using the same attendance form each day and I want to see how many students actually show up on that day, I could filter by that specific day and only see those students so I don't see duplicate data from past days. Okay, and then finally, conditional formatting. So really what conditional formatting is kind of doing is it's taking whatever data that you got and it's associating a color reference to that. So for instance, if I go back to my grading spreadsheet over here, okay, it's a little easier to see on the pre-curved version. We can clearly see the students that skipped quizzes and or did not do very well have red grades. The students that have done very well have bright green grades. So this makes it so much easier to see because immediately I know, okay, well, cool. I see their highest grades and I see their lowest grades. If I want to automatically get rid of their lowest grades, right? I see, let's say, the first student here. If I want to get rid of their lowest grades, I can see, okay, you got 3 zeros, 1, 2, 3, delete. I have a little average function here that's automatically calculating that average for me. So by deleting these guys, it goes away. And we know that if it's a blank cell, it does not get counted unless I used the average A formula, right? If I change that around a little bit, then it's going to end up being, well, I'm on Google Sheets, so it's a little bit different. But if I ended up changing that, then it would count these blank cells as zeros. So by doing conditional formatting, I can clearly see the range of these scores. Now, you sometimes have to play around with it a little bit. For instance, if let's say I was to use conditional formatting over here instead, right? I'm on my home, I go to here, conditional formatting. It's a lot of different things going on here, right? Let's say I wanted to use what I got on my grading sheet, right? Let's say I want to say highlight cell rules. I just want to change the color of these guys, right? I could change it if it's greater than a certain score, less than, between, equal, text that contains a date occurring duplicate values, right? Maybe I want to see duplicate values. I don't want to get rid of them completely, right? I could highlight duplicate values and see where those duplicate values are and assess them before I end up deleting them. Makes it a little easier for me to see. Maybe I want to kind of see something that's a little bit more, if I want to see like a range of scores, let's say, right? If I could create a new rule if I want, right? I could change 2-color scale, 3-color scale, a data bar, icon sets. Icon sets are pretty cool. It'll actually set little icons on the scores instead of just changing the color. Maybe I want to keep this blue and white color scheme going on here. I could keep that and only have little red, yellow, and green buttons here, right? And it'll actually show green when the value is between this, let's say, yellow when it's between this, red when it's below this. I could change it on all kinds of things, whether I do something like a 2-color scale, a 3-color scale, right? This is better for when you're dealing with like a data set that you kind of want to see the distribution of, such as exam scores, right? Because it'll show you a range of colors. Let's say I'm going to just do a 3-color scale, and I'm going to just do the lowest value is red, midpoint is yellow, and the highest is green. I changed that, and just like that, I got a little heat map going on over here. Now, this is just kind of random data. It's nothing really too crazy. But if it was like exam scores or something, or even like temperatures or something like that, I can clearly see the highest scores are going to be in green, the lowest scores are in red. It automatically shows based on the highest and the lowest scores. It calculates a color for the remaining values. So if I know that my lowest value is 1, okay, that's going to be my base red color. My highest value is 72, that's going to be my base green color, and everything else falls based on a distribution. So there aren't a lot of really high values here, so there's not as much green. There is quite a lot of yellow though, right? Yellow is like my midpoint here. If I took the standard distribution of all this data, I would see that my average is probably around here, 6 through 12, right? Maybe about like maybe a 6 or an 8, let's say. So that's telling us that that's why these guys are in the yellow range. So I can clearly see my data visually this way rather than putting it into a graph immediately, right? I could put it into like our charts, right? We've done bar charts and column charts yesterday. But if I don't necessarily want to plot one thing against another, conditional formatting's a great way to see my data in this way, right? For instance, I'm not plotting their scores here, right? I'm not necessarily comparing student scores in this case. Like, yeah, maybe some students did better, some maybe not so much. But I don't necessarily need to show these guys in comparison to one another, right? Unless I was showing maybe their scores over time. Like, maybe a person did really bad at the beginning and did really well towards the end. Something like that, right? I could graph that. Or if I just want to see the data on its own, maybe conditional formatting is better than that. So by the end of this course, you're going to have so many tools in your toolbox that you can essentially work with and display data in countless different ways. Okay, so let's finish off. All right. I just really personally like this because it makes it automatically makes your spreadsheet much more colorful in a way that allows you to interpret the data a lot easier. So, and there's way more things too, right? Like you can see the other features here. You could use data bars, make it into like a gradient format. You could use different color scales. You could even do it based on the top and the bottom rules as well. So maybe there's the highest value and the lowest values, and those are the only ones that get colored. Maybe I want to just show the outliers. So no matter what you want to highlight, conditional formatting can let you specify exactly what you want to color, right? Maybe I want to specify all the students who got a perfect score in the class and I want to give them an award, right? Conditional formatting. Boom, I can highlight all those students, see them immediately, and change their status to like an honor student or something like that. So a lot of great features with conditional formatting. Okay, so if you have the spreadsheet here in the figure, just an example, if I have that formatted, right, I can make it that people who got a promotion are in red and the standard are just not in red, right? So it'll only change the highlighting for whatever is equal to that promotion. Okay, we were dealing with some numbers. You can also do the same with text. If I want to say the text contains a certain thing, duplicate values, unique values, maybe it's equal to something. I could filter by someone's name. Maybe I'm looking for a certain student. Maybe I'm looking for all the students that are in alphabetical order. Could do things all like that with conditional formatting. Even if cells that are between a certain value, right? Maybe I'm looking for students that passed a class, things like that. Okay. And yeah, so we pretty much covered that. It might look a little bit different depending on your Excel version. The ones that are used in the labs are on a slightly older, an older version than what you might have on your computer. Right now, I have Excel 2026, right? So it might look a little bit more modern in a sense, right? But that's okay, right? Even though it looked a little different than this, it still did the same exact thing when I put conditional formatting on. And again, that's why, like, don't dwell on if it's not working the same way on your computer, because, things happen, all right? Like, maybe you're trying to do it one way and it's not working on the lab, but it works on your computer, or vice versa, right? What matters is you know that it exists, right? It's in your little toolbox and you know how to use it, right? We know that Google exists for a reason, right? You can always ask AI, like, I know how to do conditional formatting on Excel version 2020, but I don't know how to use it on 2026. What changed? Hey, what gives? Because Microsoft likes to switch things around. So things always change, but as long as you know the basics, you're totally fine. All right. And that is the end. So we're going to just do a couple of questions on Amplify, and then that'll be it for today. So I'm gonna just open up the rest of it. There's 3 questions and just a really quick check-in at the end. You just want to kind of see how you guys are feeling, because at this point, we have made it through the first week of class, right? So we are like officially done with week 1. So 3 more weeks, well, less than even 3 more weeks, because the last week isn't even a full week. So gotta be proud of yourselves, right? You made it through a long week, right? This would be like an entire month's worth of content that you have made it through in a week. So give yourself some credit for that, and also make sure you give yourself a bit of a break too. So if you take a look, these are the 3 questions. Question 1, and of course they're out of order. Don't worry about that, but it's just these 3 questions. And then just how you feel about the first week.
Alright, I'm done. Thank you. Hope you have a great day.
Yes, have a great day.
Bye bye.
All right. So with that being said, let's go over it, the questions, and then we'll be done for the day. Okay. So if we take a look, if we have a massive mailing list containing 5,000 rows and several clients were accidentally entered into the system multiple times, which allows you to instantly scan the table and delete identical recurring rows. Right, this is going to be our remove duplicates feature. This will allow us to remove any names that are identical, or if, let's say, their ID numbers were identical, or anything that we specify. So a very handy feature on that. Next question, you're looking at a real estate table containing homes sold across New York State. You want to hide all records temporarily except for homes located in Queens without changing the total number of records permanently. Which feature should you toggle on? So this is going to be a filter question. We're going to be using, right? We're going to be using our filter feature for this, right? Um, if we were to if we wanted to sort based on the specification, like if it's based on Queens or not Queens, it's one thing. But if we want to just hide it, right? We want to hide everything that is not Queens, then we want to filter. So filtering is going to uh, only keep what we want. Sorting is going to keep everything, but sort based on some key. Okay, and finally, if we want to dynamically apply cell shading based on some numeric condition, right? We want to say we want to make it bright red if its stock levels drop below 10 units. This is going to be an example of conditional formatting, right? We can make this turn red when our stock level drops below a certain number. Okay, so again, that's going to be it for today. Reminder that there is going to be a review on Monday during lab. The exam itself will be during lecture. We'll go over a little bit beforehand if you have any questions. So still join Zoom or come in person, whatever you prefer. We'll go over whatever you guys want, and when everybody's ready, we'll start together. You'll have the time to finish it during class time. But if you finish early, then you can just leave early. So that's going to be pretty much it. And there's going to be more info in a study guide posted as well, upcoming, probably likely tomorrow. And just honestly, best way of studying right now, just practice the practice quizzes. And you get extra points anyway. So best of luck. And if you have any questions, you can stay behind, you can ask questions, or email us, come to the Learning Commons. You can come to the math lab. We're all available. So
Professor, we have class tomorrow.
sorry, what was that?
Do we have class tomorrow?
No, only Monday through Thursday.
Okay, how do we get to chapter 4 then? Like the thing if we don't do the lab 4.
So we're gonna go over a little bit on Lab 4, right?
Hmm.
And then afterwards, it's gonna be a review.
Okay. Do you know when we're gonna go over it?
That would be up to Kevin.
Okay.
Yeah. Kevin, do you have an idea yet on how
Yeah, we can start with doing the lab 4 exercises, and we can go straight into review instead of doing the project.
Okay. I'm
Yeah,
just
so we're
wondering.
supposed to start doing the
So-
exercises now. That way you're prepared.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Have a good one, Professor.
You too. Any other questions?
Hi, Professor. I have a question.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
For the when we send announcements, what is it again? It starts with amplify. for Amplify. So do we have to sign in, or could you just use like a guest sign in?
Guest
Because
sign
that's what
it's
I.
fine. So when you put your name in, I see it and you're all set. So I've seen you log in and you're all set.
Okay, okay, and like that's basically our credit for like a presence participation for the day, right?
You got it. Yep. If you do that consistently, easy 5 points.
Okay, all right, sounds good, Professor. Thank
Of
you.
course. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Hi there. Yeah.